Hello there, I'm Guildmaster Dan, and obviously this is not the next installment in, obviously this is not the next installment in D&D Alignment Done Right. It's taking a little bit longer than the previous episode in that, in that I'm working a lot at my job recently because people are on vacation and such. And on top of that, I have a lot of freelance stuff that has been backed up, and I'm kind of working to get caught up on that. So anyway, the show got delayed a little, so I'm bringing you guys a vlog this week. Hopefully this one will be a little bit more fun for some of you, because something I've been wanting to do for a while is to show you guys like my game collection, my RPG collection. It's by no means as large as some people. I mean, I've played games outside of what I own, but these are the games I've actually, gone out of my way to buy and own. There are some that I still, that I think there are some that I want to add to my collection, and, certain editions of said games I would like to add to my collection, which I'll cover those as I go, but I kind of arrange them in order of chronology, is when I came into owning them. And this is kind of going to be like a sort of history of my, it's going to be almost a history of my gaming career, as it were. So it should be interesting. I didn't include any of my supplement books, and all that. In all honesty, I don't own that many supplement books. I'll kind of cover that in a little bit here, but these are, just core books or the player handbook of D&D, so the editions. But point being, these are just main books that you would own, the main RPGs. And there's one missing that I cannot find. These are only physical copies of the games that I have. Any PDFs don't count. These are only the physical books that I've actually paid the money to have the book to put on my bookshelf. Not as large as many other gamers I know, especially the ones that have been the hobby a lot longer than I have, but for me, this is kind of these are my main books, the ones that I have, gone out of my way to buy and own. So, without further ado, let's take a trip into my past, shall we? So the first book that I have is Aligned by Some, Loved by Many. Well, I guess I should say Aligned by Many and Loved by Many. Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. Now, this is actually what I started with. When I first got into role-playing was back in high school. Actually, I think it was in the period of my first years in college, now that I think about that. But it was just shortly. It was literally my first year of college. I ended up getting into it, and it was because my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, played the game, so I thought, I might as well check it out, right? So I found out I had some old friends from high school that had been playing it the entire time, and I never knew. So I ended up, going to Barnes & Noble. I picked up Player's Handbook. I had a real hard time, learning the rules. Mainly because, like I said back in my first episode of The Fourth Wall, seeing this and then seeing two more books on top of it can be really daunting to new players. And when you're, looking into it yourself and you don't have anyone guiding you into it, it's really daunting. I'll admit, I ended up getting the Dungeons & Dragons for Dummies book and reading that. Because without any assistance, learning what an RPG was and what Dungeons & Dragons was, I needed something, and that's what I ended up reading. So I played my very first role-playing experiences were in Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. I still enjoy the system. Definitely from over the years after having played a bunch of games and different systems, my view of it has matured a little. I see its flaws, and I see the things that I like about it, but yeah, this was my first game. This is the first game that I ever ran too. I did start out as a player, however, I only played in a campaign that didn't last very long. It was 3 sessions before it was over. And after that, I had to resort to my first game mastering experience, which was, I wanted to play, so I had a game master. So this was my first game, my first experience in game mastering and playing. From there, I actually stuck in Dungeons & Dragons for a long time. Playing in other people's games and running my own games. I played in some house games here and there, but it was actually quite a little while before I bought my next game. Now, I'm a big Warhammer 40,000 fan. I don't actually play Warhammer or Warhammer 40,000, the tabletop game, but I love the lore. I love reading the books. I've been reading Gaunt's Ghosts for a long time. I've read a ton of novels from the Black Library. I love Warhammer 40,000 and, Warhammer Fantasy. So, when I heard that they were going to do a Warhammer 40,000 role-playing game, naturally, I jumped on that news and I ended up looking into it. And the next game that I really bought and ran was Dark Heresy. And, I love this system. It's still, I'd say, my longest-running campaign ever was a Dark Heresy game ran for over a year, and I have much fond memories of it. I still like the percentiles system, or percentile-based systems the most. Ever since then, this really affected me. But love this game. It's not without its flaws, and it's definitely a specific feel to it. I mean, for one thing, the flaw has nothing to do with mechanics. But in the first edition of the game, this is probably the worst binding, or the worst bound book I ever had. I mean, you can kind of see it, how it's practically falling apart. And it started falling apart within the first couple of months. So, it was kind of ridiculous. Actually, you can almost kind of see it. I actually had to save it by using shipping tape to reinforce the binding, because otherwise it was literally falling apart. The worst freaking binding ever. But still, this game holds a place in my heart. I probably was the most involved in the community with this one. I would post on the message boards a lot, to get rules and just generally talk 40K stuff. But Dark Heresy, love the game. Now, and kind of going hand in hand with that, especially because I did a storyline where my players got trapped in a pocket dimension on a fantasy world. During that campaign, I ended up picking up the Warhammer Fantasy, the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game, second edition. I should clarify that my Dark Heresy book is first edition. They do have a second edition out now. I haven't played that, but I heard it's pretty much the same thing, just with some updates. Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game, second edition. This is just as dear to my heart as Dark Heresy. Actually, as it turns out, and as I keep opening these books and looking inside, because it's been a little while since I have opened them. Very, very fun and very interesting game. Very, very different from Dungeons and Dragons. Much harsher. There's no there's some healing. Dark Heresy was a rough setting where there was no healing almost at all. But if you could survive, you can manage. If you could survive and get back to civilization, you can get augmented, replacement. You lose limbs and stuff, but you can get replacements. In this, there's some more healing, but still an incredibly lethal system. It's because it's such a rough, Warhammer world is such a rough world, but it's very interesting. The setting is very different from your average D&D, and the system itself is very different from D&D, and I definitely like it. For a role-playing game, I mean, you have your percentile-based system, and you have a lot of stuff you would expect from D&D. But one interesting thing about this, with its system, was it didn't have classes; it had jobs. And the way it worked was you would gain your skills from your job, and you would have your job would have exit jobs. Essentially, instead of having a class where you leveled so much, you would earn all the skills in a job, and then you would need to move on to another job, and there was a career path. And you would choose which exit, which I think it was called a career exit or job exit. career exits. And, like, for example, check this out. So, one of the jobs is an agitator, right? And you have the description, you have a little sample picture of the guy, and you have everything over here. And what this is these are the improvements to your stats you can earn. These are the skills and the talents you can gain. You know, talents are kind of like feats. And, you know, you have your career entries, which is other jobs that can lead to this, and then you have your career exits, which are other jobs this can lead to. Now, what you would do is, as you get experience, you would spend your experience points on these advancements. You know, everything in here would better your stats by a little bit. Like since it's a percentile-based system, like up here, for example, it would increase related stats to this job by 5%, and you know, down here you would gain the talents and skills. And once you had earned all this, what you would do is you would spend an additional, I forget what the set amount is of experience, to go to one of the job exits. In order to do that, you had to get all the equipment you needed for that job so that when you went to it, you had everything you needed for it. And then you would start doing that. And so as you played through the game, if your character actually lived long enough, he would have ended up holding like as much as like 4 or 5 jobs. There was no real upper limit to how many jobs you could own, but there was a limit to how high your stats could go. And that was just a really interesting system. This game, however, I owned like out of supplements to games, this one I owned the most to. I ended up buying supplements for this more than any other game. And really, I didn't even run a full campaign of this. This was just a part of my Dark Heresy campaign. It just turns out that, you know, all of the Warhammer Fantasy, or at least as far as 2nd edition, and the Warhammer 40k role plays, all had like the same sort of, all had the same system, all percentile based, and were compatible. This had some differences. I worked with it, but the point being, like, this was only part of it, but it was such a good time that I picked up supplements to go with this. And these are all like great produced books, all completely full color, and just a great, like, if you haven't played this game, pick it up. There is a 3rd edition out from Fantasy Flight Games that I don't particularly care for. I prefer my 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. The 3rd edition has like custom dice, and it's over $100 to buy the game, and I didn't really much care for it. For a lot of for a comparison, for a lot of D&D players, how people felt about 4th edition after 3.5, that's kind of how I feel about 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy. It's not for the same reasons, but that's kind of how I feel about it. It's I much prefer my 2nd edition. Next, something that probably actually the second game that I ever played, but took a while before I ran, is Vampire the Masquerade, 2nd edition revised. This is Old World of Darkness, which some people have a problem with, but I prefer. I much prefer the clans from the Old World of Darkness and how everything was set up. But the second game I ever played was Vampire the Masquerade, but it did take a while before I ended up buying the book. I really enjoy running Vampire. The system itself is, I don't know. I mean, I kind of consider it a little wonky at this point, having played a bunch of other games, but the atmosphere in this game, when it's run well, is just fantastic, and you can really get into your characters, and I like this not as much as, say, Dungeons & Dragons or Dark Age, but I would say this is probably, this is up there with okay, I'll tell you, I don't have that many games, so they're all kind of close to my heart, with exception to the ones I haven't had a chance to run yet. But this is definitely up there. This is one of the ones that I've had experience with for a long time, and I really enjoy playing it and running it. So Vampire the Masquerade, great game. I like it being self-contained. I don't like mixing it too much with the other Old World Darkness stuff. If you play this as a self-contained game, I think it works a lot better. Especially if you don't get too involved with, like, one of the complaints I've heard about this is there's, like, too much lore for it. There's too much canon you have to contend with and know. Well, no, you don't actually have to know that. You know, stick with your one city that you make up and, you know, run your adventures there. You know, let the outside deal with you a little bit, but otherwise, this is a fun game, great atmosphere. Definitely enjoyed playing it. I'm glad to own it. Don't much care for Requiem or, you know, the New World of Darkness. Now, something that was given to me, that this is one of the games I have yet to run, but I'm definitely glad to own because I actually like it better than Dark Heresy. But the second Warhammer 40,000 role-playing game to come out, Rogue Trader. This is an awesome game whereas in the first game, Dark Heresy, where you're running, you are agents of the Inquisition. In this one, you are a rogue trader. You are outside the borders of the Imperium, doing trading things, seeking glory, all that fun stuff. Essentially, rogue traders are like the only free people from the Imperium, because they have their, I forget what they're called offhand, but they have their really important document that tells them, hey, out of, you know, our fascist government, you were the only people that are actually free. This is a fun game. This is like Dark Heresy. It's the same system, so it's compatible. You know, you can use career paths and stuff between the two, but this one's a little more adventuring oriented. Whereas Dark Heresy and the game that follows this, Deathwatch, and even Only War, which followed that, are all very mission based because they're very regimental, and essentially you're in the military forces or the Inquisition forces of the Imperium. So it's very mission based. You can now, you know, in Dark Heresy you get into spy stuff too, which that's good. That's a little bit better than just mission based. You can get involved in things, but this one's really adventure based. You're seeking glory. Everything's open ended. You have more control of your destiny in this one. So, plus it's added, you know, like spaceship combat, and you own your own spaceship. It's very cool. So I like this one better than Dark Heresy because I feel it works better as an RPG, but at the same time, you know, I have yet to actually get to run this. So, love this book. I'm very happy that it was given to me. It was given to me as a gift, but I've yet to run this. I would like to. And now I'm looking at it again. I'm thinking I have to get around to doing that because I've had this for a little while. All right, next. Now, it took me a while before I got to play this, actually, until I went to a con. But when I did go to a con, I fell in love with it. Well, actually, without even going, that's pretty much it. Mutants and Masterminds 2nd Edition. Mutants and Masterminds is one of, like, my go-to games. I've run games of this many times. I love making characters in this game. This is a point-buy character creation system. One of those systems where you can make literally anything, but there's multiple ways to do it. And I mean, there's a lot of math involved, and it's a lot more work to make a character than, say, Dungeons and Dragons or any of the Warhammer role-playing books. But it's legitimately fun. It's like a game in itself making characters because there's different ways to do it and figuring out how to do it. Now, I've played like 3rd edition a lot too, which my Mutants Mastermind friends keep getting on me to switch over to because they did improve some things in it. And even that you can kind of see on there. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see how much my book has been marked up from use. This is like one of my favorite games. I'll do a top 5 sometime. But this is definitely one of my favorite games, Mutants and Masterminds. It is just so much fun. I love the system. The only die you need for the entire system is a D20. That's it. It's fun making characters. It's fun role-playing superheroes, even though that's kind of a niche for, you know, role players. It's a lot of fun. I love this game. I love, you know, you guys are hearing about me running the our Marvel Genesis Living Marvel game. That's using Mutants and Masterminds. Love this game. just, like, I always have a blast. Playing this game and running the game, love it. Yeah. So let me put that away. The next, now, I haven't, the next, it took me some time. I mentioned that I played 3.5, Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 a long time. Actually, for a long time, it was the only game I had played. And even out of role-playing games, or out of Dungeons & Dragons itself, you know, I've probably played 3.5 the most. But that being said, over the years, after having played 3.5 and other editions now, including First and 3.75, you know, Pathfinder, my preferred edition that I've come to out of all of them is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition. For Dungeons & Dragons players who have not played the older editions, it's a simpler version of D&D. Comparing it to 3.5 and, you know, 4th and Next coming out now, a lot of people like to, I don't know, a lot of people don't know what they're talking about, I think, because they'll say it's more complex or that it's nothing like First. I think it's the most diverse and yet simplified rule set out of them. It doesn't go overboard with like abilities and everything. Classes are simple and straightforward. And actually just your abilities and what you're able to do are very straightforward and very simple. This was before the days of floating DC. You know, when you actually rolled against your stat to accomplish things instead of rolling against an imaginary number that the GM just made up. I don't know. It's my preferred edition. I'm playing in 2 2nd edition AD&D games right now, and those are my weekly games. It's my preferred edition out of the 3, and it's because it has the depth to it, but it's also a much simpler rule set. There's a lot less clutter in the books, and I don't know, with the newer editions, there's a lot of, I'd say there's like a lot of a marketing feel to the newer books when they come out, but kind of like looking through this book and flipping through it, you know, it looked like, now the design looks almost kind of antiquated, but just flipping through it and reading it, and I don't know, to me, it seems like there's a lot of heart to it, like from the creators, and a lot less marketing feel to it. Like I feel like I'm being sold to less with these books. It feels like the art is like actual like fantasy art. It feels like this is inspired by, you know, the books and things that inspire the game masters, whereas, you know, the newer books feel like they're trying to sell you, you know, the worlds that they want you to make. This one feels like it's really inspired by, like, you know, the actual, like, fantasy stories that inspire them. Which, by the way, TSR is the creators, for anyone who didn't know. Because I know there are a lot of gamers now who were born after they were gone. And trust me, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Like I said, I came to this late, so don't feel like I'm not talking like I know all about TSR, but they're the ones that made this, and I can tell the difference just from reading it and looking through it as compared to Wizards of the Coast. Hey, I still like 3.5, not downing that at all, but this is my preferred edition, and it definitely feels like TSR had some heart behind it. So, next is a game I picked up relatively recently, within the last couple of years. I have yet to run it, but it's a little indie game that I found at a con, and it's probably going to be the only print of it ever, since from the sound of it from the vendor, it sounds like the company went out of business. But it's a game I came across called Pantheon, and like I said, it's a little indie game from Lonely Die Press. See, it's called Lonely Die because their symbol's a D12, because you never use a D12. But Pantheon, I bought because it's an interesting setting and an interesting concept. And it was like super cheap. But Pantheon is a game where you play your favorite pagan god. Like, the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, the Norse gods. Heck, any god from the ancient world. The concept is, they're all gone now. They don't have any modern cults or anything. But you choose one of your god, your favorite of those gods. So you can play Ares, you can play Thor. I've always wanted to play Coyote. You pick any one of those gods, and the idea is you wake up in modern times. You don't know why you wake up in modern times, but when your worshippers went away, you fell into a deep slumber in the ethereal realm. And now you wake up on Earth in modern times, and it's all about you going out and trying to reestablish your religion and your domain over the world. And it's a very interesting setting. It's a very cool concept. I like it a lot. And on top of that, it has a really interesting setting where it actually covers the whole, how all the pagan religions and how, how Judaism and Christianity and Islam, pretty much how all the religions and all their myths fit together in one cosmology. And it covers all that and how everything fits in the ethereal realm. And it's a very interesting setting and very interesting concept for play. I have yet to play in it or run it, but I'm glad for picking it up because I've read through the book and it is definitely interesting. One interesting thing about it is it has a mechanic for words of power where you use your powers by actually constructing sentences. Yeah, it's kind of a novel idea. It's been a while since I read it, so I can't fully explain it. But the idea is like you as a player actually construct a sentence using words of power, and that dictates what happens in the game world. So it's kind of you were actually like speaking things into being and speaking your will into becoming reality in this game. It's very interesting. I'm glad I bought it. I definitely want to play it sometime if I don't run it. After that, we've reached games that I've come actually into very recently, within the last year, and two of which I haven't run yet. Actually, technically three of which I haven't run yet, but I have played and glad to have them. This next one is very heavy, but Pathfinder. I've mentioned that, I prefer 2nd edition AD&D, but that's fine. Like I said, I enjoy 3.5 and I enjoy Pathfinder. They're a very different feel to Dungeons & Dragons, to D&D, to AD, to 2nd edition to 2nd edition AD&D. It's a very different feel, so I have no problem having the different editions. Having the different editions and then Pathfinder. Sorry, Paizo, I don't mean to keep comparing it back, but we all know your roots. I actually won this from Paizo. Well, I won this at the Roleplay-a-thon, which those of you who have been with me a while may remember that it's an event I run every year. It's a charity event where local gamers register teams and get together and run a role-playing game for 24 hours in order to raise money for a good cause. Well, Paizo was one of our sponsors this last year, and hopefully this year. And they were very generous and donated us some core rule books and a bunch, some core rule books, some battle mats, some novels from the campaign setting, and I think and some goblin plushies. Very, 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 very generous donation from them. I'm very happy that they chose to sponsor us. My team ended up winning not all of the things that they donated. Kind of everything that was donated from all the sponsors got split into different bundles. But this was in the one bundle that my team won. We raised the most money for Charity Water, which was the cause. So our team got to divvy up the prizes, which were mainly like rule books and such. hence the core rulebook, the donated core rulebooks being in there. Anyway, I'm very happy to have this for two reasons. One, this kind of represents, you know, Paizo's support for my attempts to do a good thing, and I really appreciate that. But also because Pathfinder is a fun game. I love playing a gunslinger. I think that's probably one of the, like, out of, like, you know, more modern fantasy games, it's probably my favorite thing to play is a cowboy. Because I've talked about it before, Old West is a lot like fantasy. And cowboys just fit so well into here. I mean, some people get a little huffy about the whole black powder thing in their fantasy game, but whatever, I'm fine with it. And I love playing a gunslinger in Pathfinder, and it's a good game. It is a solid game. It's definitely like 3.5. I'm very happy to have this. It's actually a very complete book, too. I really like that. And, you know, for anyone who doesn't like Pathfinder, you know, for whatever reason, they can say whatever they want. But one thing that I will give, you know, Paizo over, like, anything else is, and I don't know his name, but the artist, their main artist that they chose to do all of their artwork is just fantastic. I get, like I said, I don't really know the name of this artist, but the art for Pathfinder is fantastic. Like, all of it. It has a very distinct feel to it, and it is all just, like, very well done, and I'm very impressed by it. This is also a great quality book. It's very complete. Nice. I haven't run Pathfinder yet, but I am very glad to have this. I have played it, I just haven't run it yet. Very glad to have this. Thank you, Paizo, for your support. Please do it again. Next. Now, this one, I'm very sad I haven't run it yet. I got on a Gundam kick a little while back. I've been a Mobile Suit Gundam fan for a long time, watching the shows and everything, but I was very disappointed with the more recent Gundam series until I went a little bit back and watched the Gundam Unicorn OAV series. And that really got me back on my Gundam kick. And I wanted a game that emulated that. And there were some options out there. I did my research, and I ended up finding the one that I felt worked the best, like had the best rule set for it. It's another point-buy system. It's Mechton Zeta. It's a little bit of an older game. It's out of print now. I had to go on Amazon and buy a used copy. But it's a game. It's similar to Mutants and Masterminds in that you use a point-buy system to build your mechs and to build your spaceships and to build essentially all the vehicles in here, including the mechs, which are the main focus. You use a point-buy system to build them all. So it's the same thing. It's not the exact same thing as Mutants and Masterminds, where you can build anything, but you can build pretty much anything. Especially if you get the one supplement book with this, you can build pretty much anything. Now this is actually This is the latest edition that is currently out. They are working on a new edition of this called Mechton Zero, which I look forward to getting. One of the reasons why I haven't run this yet is the system is kind of dependent on miniatures. You can run it without miniatures, but it gets kind of difficult when, like, your weapons ranges, you're dealing in... Well, let me put it this way. You know, in Dungeons & Dragons, when you're dealing with hexes, you're typically talking like a 10-foot square. In this, when you're talking about a single hex of space, you're talking about 100 meters of space, which, you know, you could probably imagine that. Like, okay, like, I can imagine a mech standing on a football field, so I can pretty much imagine what 100 meters cubed of space looks like. But when you have weapons that their range is, you're dealing in 30 or 60 hexes of space, it becomes really hard to, you know, navigate that in your head. And I've always been a very old school GM where I prefer, you know, no miniatures, no maps. I keep everything in the head and only describing scenes. Now, Mechton Zero that's coming out soon, which I'll end up picking up, is supposed to give better rules for running it without miniatures. Otherwise, I'm very disappointed I haven't run this yet. because I have read through this book too. Lots of rich settings with it. It's a very cool game. If you like mech anime, definitely pick this up or wait a little bit longer until Mech Ton Zero comes out. Very cool game. I look forward to running it when I get a chance. I'm kind of waiting for Mech Ton Zero at this point. But very cool game. It's mostly black and white, but it's by R. Talsorian, the guy behind Cyberpunk. And actually, one of the official settings for this is a in the future version of the Cyberpunk setting with mechs and space and stuff. So yeah, it's by R. Talsorian. Very cool game. Point buy system, and Mech Ton Zero is coming out. So either pick this up if you want a really good mech game, or wait till Mech Ton Zero comes out. Now, lastly, you guys have heard me talk about, so I won't spend a lot of time on. Of course, I bought Numenera. Now, I bought Numenera. All right, I'll just lay it out there. I bought Numenera because of the Gentleman Gamer. I watched his review of it, and he said he hoped that his excitement for it was infectious, and admittedly it was. It was enough for me to check out the book and do some reading on it, and the concept was very interesting. I liked it a lot, so I decided to pick. Well, anyway, I took my time. I decided if I did my research, which I liked everything I researched, if I gave it some time and saved up some money for it, then I would go ahead and dish out the $60 plus shipment to get it. And on top of that, there were some hiccups in getting it, but the people at Monty Cook Games were really good about it. They paid for my shipment and my shipping and got it to me. But I do like this game. Having looked through the book, I like it a lot. I've run it a couple of times, just the adventures in the back. I look forward to running a proper campaign of it. I'll probably be running this at this year's Role Play-a-thon because I really want to run it in a custom game. But very interesting game, very refreshing setting. I've put up 2 videos about this already, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it. Very cool game. Check it out, or check out my other videos if you want to learn more about it. And that's the last of my book. That's actually all of my collection of core rule books and player's handbooks. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 11 games, minus 1, which I don't have. I actually have a physical copy of Cat from John Wick. I just can't find it. Cat's a real fun game that you play house cats protecting their owners from invisible monsters. That's a very fun, very comedic, and very streamlined game. Very fun. I highly recommend that as well. I'm sorry I don't have a book to show you, but that's also a game. So yeah, I have a small collection compared to a lot of gamers out there, but I'm kind of selective with my books. There are some things I want to add. I'll probably want to get D&D next for it because I like this. I like a lot of the stuff I'm seeing for D&D next. I still want to get Call of Cthulhu. I've played that game and enjoyed it a lot. So I still want to add that to my collection. And let's see. Oh, yeah, and I kind of want to round out my my Warhammer 40,000 role-playing experience. I'd like to get Deathwatch, Only War, and Black Crusade, which are the 3 other games out. And who knows? Maybe I'll pick up the second edition of Dark Heresy. But so yeah, that's my game collection, and that's kind of a brief history of my gaming career, or at least as far as it goes with the games that I own. I have played other games, cons and stuff, but as far as games that I own, that's kind of real brief, light history. Even though it took 40 minutes. But for anyone who's watched this far, I hope you find that interesting. I hope that maybe I don't know, one of the covers looked cool enough that you want to do some research on your own. Out of the pile, I mean, since I'm kind of selective with what I own, I'd recommend, checking out any of them. But if I have to recommend things to play out of the games that I had, Numenera and Mechton, I'm really impressed with the rules and everything. Mutants and Masterminds, I love. Play Mutants and Masterminds if you get a chance. Very streamlined, very fun, especially if you like superheroes. Out of Dungeons & Dragons, I'd say 2nd edition AD&D. Other than that, yeah. Those are my games. I won't keep you guys any longer. Next week you should be seeing Chaotic Good, and I will see you guys later. To quote Markiplier, bye bye.